In both coastal and celestial navigation, the U-boat position can be determined by the point of intersection of the two navigational isolines. Navigational isoline is the totality of all points at which U-boat can probably be located if one navigational parameter, direction or distance, is specified relative to one landmark. If only the direction to the landmark is specified, then the navigational isoline is a straight line. The U-boat can be at any point of this line. If only the distance to the landmark is specified, then the navigational isoline is a circle. At the center of this circle is a landmark. The radius of this circle corresponds to the distance between the U-boat and the landmark. The U-boat can be at any point in this circle. In Silent Hunter 5, lighthouses are suitable landmarks for coastal navigation. All bases have one or two lighthouses. If you know the location of the lighthouses, you can determine the U-boat position in several ways. If the positions of the two lighthouses are known, and the directions to these lighthouses are known, then the U-boat position is the point of intersection of these lines. To find your position, you need to know your heading and bearings on the first and second lighthouse. To draw isolines 1 and 2, it is necessary to calculate the azimuths taken from the lighthouses in the direction of the U-boat. If heading is 180 degrees, then these azimuths are numerically equal to the taken bearings. In other cases, the azimuth is determined by the formula. Let's apply this method in practice. We are located in the Bay of Lorient. We plot the location of the two lighthouses on the map. We take the bearing on the first lighthouse. Knowing our heading, we calculate the azimuth from the first lighthouse in the direction of the U-boat. We plot the first isoline in accordance with the calculated azimuth. We take the bearing to the second lighthouse and make a similar calculation and plotting of the second isoline. The intersection of these two isolines is the U-boat position. If there is only one lighthouse on the base, then you need to use another method. We can determine the direction of the lighthouse and the distance to it. The U-boat position lies at the intersection of two isolines. We take the bearing to the lighthouse, calculate the azimuth and plot the first navigational isoline in the way we already know. We measure the distance to the lighthouse using a rangefinder. The height of all Silent Hunter 5 lighthouses is 70 meters. Determining the distance to the lighthouse is carried out as well as the distance to the ship with a mast height of 70 meters. The optical height of the lighthouse at 15.5 scale divisions at the maximum periscope magnification corresponds to a distance to the lighthouse of 1800 meters. We plot this distance and find the U-boat position as a point of intersection of isolines. Let's repeat the position determination using the example of the second lighthouse. We will use a modification of this method in the practice of celestial navigation in combination with taking a bearing on a radio beacon. Back to coastal navigation, the methods that we have reviewed are conveniently used when U-boat is stopped. When the U-boat moves at a constant speed and heading, it is convenient to use the cross-bearing method. During the movement, two bearings of one lighthouse are taken. This position of the lighthouse corresponds to the first bearing. By the time taking the second bearing, the position of the lighthouse relative to U-boat is changing. To understand the physical meaning of these drawings, it is enough to imagine that you are standing still and the lighthouse moves relative to you with speed v, but in the direction opposite to your heading. Between taking the first and second bearing, time t passes. During this time, the lighthouse travels the distance s. Thus, the thought experiment looks as follows. While the lighthouse was moving from point 1 to point 2, U-boat stood still all this time. Drawing isolines is made as well as in the methods considered earlier. The intersection of these lines is the U-boat position at the time of taking the second bearing. For example, the U-boat leaves the base in keel. Before taking the first bearing to the lighthouse, we set the heading and speed, which will not change until the second bearing is taken.
Вижу корабль. Курс 151. Руль 0.
Our heading is 20 degrees, our speed is 10 knots. As the first bearing, if the situation allows, you can wait for a value convenient for calculations. In our case, let it be 320 degrees. At the moment of taking the first bearing, we start the stopwatch. It is desirable that the difference between the first and second bearings be as close to 90 degrees as possible. To do this, we need 5 minutes between taking bearings. That is, 300 seconds after taking the first bearing, we will take the second bearing. Speed in knots divided by 2 equal to speed in meters per second, approximately. Following at a speed of 10 knots, we walk about 5 meters in 1 second. In 300 seconds, we will walk about 1,500 meters. We plot this distance from the location of the lighthouse on the map in the direction of our heading. From the end point of this distance, we plot the isoline that corresponds to the first bearing taken. After 5 minutes, take the second bearing and plot a second isoline. The intersection point of the first and second isolines is your position at the time of taking the second bearing. And now, once again, imagine that at the time of taking the first bearing, the lighthouse was here and was moving at a speed of 10 knots in the opposite direction to your heading. 5 minutes later, the lighthouse is here, and the second time you take a bearing on it. Between taking the first and second bearing, you did not move anywhere and were at this point. This thought experiment will help to understand the cross-bearing method. We will return to this idea when we study the method of determining the U-boat position by the sun.